The next situation within inflection route number 1 is when a display form ends with the D consonant once ta is removed. For example, 닫다, 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 which is the display form of the verb close. When you close a door or a window, for example. For the most part, when a display form ends with the D consonant, once ta is removed, you will apply the 3-step formula that should look familiar. Why? Because it is exactly the same 3-step formula that we applied in the previous video, in the 9th video out of the 15, when we were talking about when display forms end with the G consonant or the N consonant. For the most part, in the D situation as well, you will apply that 3-step formula. However, I am placing emphasis on for the most part, which means that there are exceptions, in large 4 exceptions. However, let's first go through words that don't fall into the list of those exceptions first, and then after that we can go to the 4 exceptions in large and talk about how we will inflect when we do have one of those 4 exceptions. Close is not one of those 4 exceptions. So we will apply the 3-step formula to inflect the ta ending into some kind of a new ending. In this case, the past tense ending. 써요, 써요, 써요. So step number 1, remove ta. Step number 2, place a or o as the irregular middle section. Now we know what decides whether the irregular middle section is going to be a or o, right? We are reviewing what we talked about in the 9th video, in the previous video. There are 21 vowels in Korean, and if the vowel that came right before the D consonant is one of the 4, a, ya, o, or yo, then it means that the irregular middle section should look like a. If it is not one of the 4, in other words, one of the other 17, then it means that the irregular middle section will look like all. Right now, we do have a, which is one of the 4. Therefore, the irregular middle section will look like a. So according to step number 2, now we have 닫아, 닫아. And then, according to step number 3, we can attach the new ending that we want to use. Now, according to the 3-step formula, we have 닫았어요, 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 which is the actual form past tense of the verb close, which is closed. Therefore, we can use it, for example, when we say something like, why did you close the door? I will omit grammatical components that are not used in Korean or too obvious according to the context. Placing did in front of a question sentence that already has a verb as an auxiliary verb is not something that you would do in Korean, so I will omit it. But if I do omit it, now there is a fundamental issue. That issue being, now there is nothing that is indicating past tense. That is why the verb has to do it itself, and that is why we inflected close into closed. And, of course, you is too obvious according to the context. And no articles, no us and thus in Korean. Which leaves us with The adverb y, the verb close, however in past tense closed, and the object door. So therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 문 왜 닫았어요? 문 왜 닫았어요? 문 왜 닫았어요? Why closed door? Now in the beginning, I said, when it comes to the D situation, there are exceptions. What I mean by that is, there are, in large, 4 words, 4 display forms that also end with the D consonant once ta is removed. However, they do not follow this 3-step rule, 3-step formula. They follow their own inflecting formula. The 4 exceptions are walk, listen to, or hear, ask, realize. There are more, however, when it comes to everyday life normal conversations, you are pretty much safe with these 4 at first. Now, let's take one of the 4 exceptions and take a look into how they will be inflected through a different inflecting formula. Let's take walk, which is one of the 4 exceptions. The 4 exceptions follow the 4-step formula that you are looking at right now. Step number 1, remove ta. Number 2, change the D into an R. And then number 3, place the irregular middle section, a or all. Of course, what decides whether it's going to be a or all, once again, is always going to be the vowel that came right before the D consonant. Yes, the D has been changed into R, however, it was originally D, so take a look at the vowel that came right before the D consonant. The vowel all is not one of the 4. It is not a, ya, o, or yo. In other words, it is one of the other 17. Therefore, the irregular middle section this time will look like all. And now, according to step number 4, you can attach some kind of a new ending. This time, let's use 요, which indicates actual form, present tense. Therefore, now, according to the 4-step formula, we have 걸어요, 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 which is the actual form, present tense of the verb walk, which is walk. Therefore, we can use it for practice. For example, when we say something like, I just walk alone. Let's say my friend asks me, what do you do when you have too many thoughts and you want to clear your head a little bit? And I'm going to say, I just walk alone by myself. Of course, before I translate, I am going to omit I because it is too obvious according to the context. Of course, I'm talking about I. You asked me what I do when I need to clear my head. So of course, I'm talking about I. Therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 그냥 혼자 걸어요. 그냥 혼자 걸어요. 그냥 혼자 걸어요. Just walk alone. Now, let's move on to the next situation, which is when a display form ends with the L or R consonant once ta is removed. For example, 멀다, 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 which is the display form of the adjective far. There are more details. However, for now, I'll make it very simple. If this consonant is placed in front of a vowel, then it will sound a little bit closer to R. However, if it is placed in front of a consonant or at the end of a word, then it will sound a little bit closer to L. So, when you have a display form that ends with the L or R consonant, once ta is removed, in order to inflect the ta ending into some kind of a new ending, you will go back to the familiar three-step formula. It is familiar, right? It is the three-step formula that we used for the G, N, and the majority of the D situation. So let's go through the three steps. Number 1, remove ta. Number 2, place a or all as the irregular middle section. Which one is it going to be? Yes, all, because you have to always look at the vowel that came right before the L or R consonant. Right now, it is all, and all is not one of the four. It is not a, ya, o, or you. In other words, it is one of the other 17. Therefore, the irregular middle section will look like all. And now, according to step number 3, we can attach the new ending. Once again, let's use the 요 ending that indicates actual form present tense. 멀어요, 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 which is the actual form present tense of the adjective far, which is far. So, for example, we can use it when we say something like, it is too far. Let's say my friend says, hey, let's go to that new pizza place. And I'm going to say, no, it is too far. Of course, I will omit it. Of course, I am talking about the new pizza place. And do not take into consideration is, am, was, were, are, which leaves us with the adverb to and the adjective far. Therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 너무 멀어요. 너무 멀어요. 너무 멀어요. Too far. Now, let's go to the next situation within inflection route number 1, which is when a display form ends with the M consonant once ta is removed. In this case, you will once again go to the familiar 3-step formula. And as an example, you have 감다, 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 which is the display form of the verb close. Yes, 감다 is also close. However, a version of close that you will only use for eyes. Not when you close doors or windows, only when you close your eyes. Now, it is a perfect example, so let's apply the 3-step formula. Step number 1, remove ta. Number 2, place a or all as the irregular middle section. Which one is it going to be? Yes, a, because you always have to look at the vowel that came right before the M consonant. In this case, a. And a is one of the 4. A. Therefore, the irregular middle section will look like a. And then, number 3, you can attach the new ending that you are looking to use. This time, let's use the ending for have to. 야 돼요, 야 돼요. 가마야 돼요, 감아야 돼요. 감아야 돼요. Which is no longer just close. Now it's have to close. We can use it as practice. For example, when we say something like, do I have to close my eyes? Let's say today is my birthday and my friend says, hey, I have a surprise for you. And I'm going to say, oh, do I have to close my eyes? Of course, I am going to first omit grammatical components that are too obvious according to the context or components that are not used in Korean. Placing do in front of a question sentence that already has a verb as an auxiliary verb is not something that you would do in Korean. So I will take it away. And of course, I'm talking about I. And of course, I'm talking about my eyes. And of course, I'm talking about both of my eyes. Therefore, I will omit I, my, and the plural as well, which leaves us with the verb have to close and the object I. Therefore, the Korean sentence will look like 눈 감아야 돼요. 눈 감아야 돼요. 눈 감아야 돼요. Have to close eyes. That was it for today's video. In the next video, we will keep on moving forward until we cover each and every situation within inflection route number 1. Inflection is by far the most important aspect of learning Korean. Therefore, if you fully grasp inflection through this course, you are not taking a step forward, you are taking 1,000 steps forward. So don't give up, and I will see you in the next video.